We're going to return to our open meeting here. First business is public hearings and presentations to or by the board. Letter A is questions from the floor. At this time, any person wishing to speak on any question previously discussed through administrative channels and not on the agenda will be granted 5 minutes to make a presentation to the board. Please state your name for the record. Okay, seeing none, we'll go on to B. Presentations on agenda items. Any person wishing to speak on any items on the agenda, we granted 5 minutes to make a presentation. Please state your name for the record. All right, very good. Consent agenda. Consent agenda is utilized by the board as a means of dealing with routine matters which must be considered by the Board of Education but require a minimum of discussion. All board members receive and review written information supporting the items listed on the consent agenda well in advance of the meeting. While any Board of Education member is welcome to remove any item from the consent agenda for separate consideration or discussion for any reason, normally all items on the consent agenda are approved in one motion with a minimum of discussion. And tonight it's recommended that items A through E be approved.
I'll move we approve the consent agenda, items A through E.
I second it.
All right, thank you. All those in favor of approval of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. All right, thank you. All right, under new business, personnel, the board will consider adding an additional full-time early childhood special education teacher due to increased numbers in the program, and I believe Mr. Henshaw is going to share that information with us.
Correct. Our early childhood special education program it usually starts out at about 28 to 30 students. They qualify by age and need. Those numbers have grown, and they typically grow throughout the school year to about 60 by the end of the year. We're at 41 and anticipate somewhere between 4 to 7 additional in the next couple of weeks that have been tested to see if they qualify. So they should be starting, and so our numbers are growing quicker than they normally do. Typically, last year, for example, we were around 40 in January, and we did last year add a half-time person for the remainder of the year. So we're asking the board, recommending to the board that we add, that you approve up to 1 full FTE for this year. And we'll start the interview process, and by the time we hire that person, we may, based on numbers, they may start at half-time and then it may turn into a full-time position. But we're just asking for approval up to that for this current school year of an FTE.
Are those students being identified through PAT or?
They're identified through PAT and also referrals from medical doctors. But PAT does a lot of that for us, that communication between the medical field. And also many parents are aware of it. They have to wait until they hit a certain age to be tested and to qualify. So as soon as they have that birthday, then they can come to our school and be tested. So we test on Wednesdays typically, and see if they qualify. And then as soon as, if they do, then it's just making arrangements for the parents. You know, they'll start, some of them start the next week, some of them take a couple of weeks to get transportation and everything lined out. But as soon as we can get them here, we want to try to help them the best we can.
What would be the specifics then? You would hire somebody half-time if we approve this. You would come to us for that, and then when the need came to increase their full-time, you would come back to the board?
My request would be that you approve a full-time position, and that way we wouldn't have to come back, Jim, unless we needed to add another staff member.
Okay.
We won't we can do it either way. My thought is that way, if the person, if we definitely need them half-time right now. But we anticipate numbers will continue to grow, and we may need to add some hours to their schedule to make them
I don't know
full-time.
that an additional action by the board would be necessary. Could you report to us?
Sure.
once that took
Sure,
place?
we would let you know if we're increasing that, but we can also do it the other way as well if you want. It's,
So we got close to
Be
60.
delayed.
By the time we ended last year, we were close to 60.
right.
So we're on track to continue to make that.
Yeah.
It's just this year that number's reaching a higher point sooner. And we're seeing some students with much higher needs this year as well.
And this is reimbursable since it's.
It is, we would be reimbursed the salary amounts in next year's budget. So it's it would come out of this budget and affect this budget, but then next year, we receive the funding back to cover the cost.
I'll make the motion that we add the additional full-time position.
No, I'll second that motion.
All right, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Good. Thank you, Mr. Henshaw.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move to hopefully what most of you are here tonight for is an open community forum. And we're going to kick that off with Dr. Zales is going to share with us again his presentation, which he's done, I know, many times in the community and certainly many times for us. So I think it's changed a little bit as we've gathered more information in the last probably, 12 to 18 to 24 months, right?
24 months, yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of exciting to see how it's evolved. So he's going to share this with us, and then when he's finished, then we'll have time to respond to any questions that folks here might have, as well as some questions were submitted to Dr. Zales via email and so forth that we'll also share. So.
Plus, we're being televised live now, and we'll have it replayed, and it will also appear a link to our website. So this presentation plus the forum and questions asked can be heard by our community as well. So as Jamie mentioned, we'll start with this kind of outline with the presentation first on early childhood planning, and Jamie will kind of facilitate, as our board president, the input process. He's got the bank of questions that some people have submitted electronically. We'll allow 3 to 5 minutes for any comments for people that are in the audience, and then we plan to spend about 30 to 45 minutes just on the forum itself, depending upon how many want to participate. And again, any frequently asked questions, we'll continue to take those and we'll place those on the website. Nancy is going to kind of distill the topics and the questions into a digestible format on the website. We'll keep this going. So everything that we do, I think the underlying words are most important. Part of our new CSIP plan, the Strategic Comprehensive School Improvement Plan, or strategic plan, certainly spins off of opportunities for our students based on excellence in personnel, facilities, curriculum, and instruction. We're going to hit a little bit of the facilities and personnel part tonight, and actually this whole forum is directly related to CSIP Goal 5, which is governance and trying to engage the community and helping us chart a direction for the school district. The goals that have been in place in our school district have changed as a result of data that we've received from assessments, but also input that we received on the CSIP, and you see those there. They're also behind us and help guide us as a board as we move through every meeting. Our strategic plan that I mentioned, these are the 5 areas. The main areas that both have goals and strategies. Within each of those, the numbers that are in parentheses represent the number of times that early childhood appears as a goal for us to consider, or a strategy for us to achieve through planning. So it's pretty significant and reinforces the connection to the previous CSIP or strategic plan that we just are working out of. Of course, the initiatives from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education as a qualifier for the waiver of No Child Left Behind, the bold second bullet, talking about early learning as a focus, as a top 10 by 20 performing state, increase opportunities for early childhood. I don't need to tell most educators, particularly kindergarten teachers, of the importance of early learning relative to achievement gaps, particularly in children as young as 9 months of age. Also the return on investment, more cost effective to intervene with children early and reduce the need for remediation and poor absenteeism, or poor attendance rates, excuse me, high absenteeism and everything that goes along with early interaction with school, we want to be able to affect. Experts tell us that we have 90% of brain development occurs by the age of 5. You see 2,000 days under early learning works. We literally have 2,000 days from the birth of a child to the time they become kindergarten ready age to affect some change. And if 90% of that brain development occurs by the age of 5, it certainly stands to reason that early intervention and early interaction with school is a positive thing. It's been said, I've had some conversation with those that say things even out by the time they reach 3rd grade. I would say that if all things were equal from the beginning, then that might be true. But we have kids that are not receiving services that could. And so I think that's why this board and hopefully our community is behind our effort to increase our early childhood efforts. We do a really good job on the second bar graph across. What this delineates is the ways that you impact student achievement. We have really good at-risk programming in our school district in 2 different locations for credit recovery and for those students that are struggling in the normal school setting. The one area where the bar at the top, where the most significant return on that effort occurs, is the area of our focus where we think that we can do better. So what do kindergartners need to know? I'm not going to read this list to you, but many people ask, you know, what are children going to need to know now as they enter kindergarten? What are the things they're going to need to go to the registration or screening? What are they going to learn in kindergarten? These are the 9 key skills. Thanks to our existing kindergarten teachers, you know, we asked them, what's kindergarten like now as opposed to what it was, let's say, 5 to 10 years ago, particularly when we started all-day kindergarten in the Raleigh School District in 2002. So we're certainly a living history of how that's evolved. There are certainly school districts in the state of Missouri who've added it in the last 3 to 5 years. But what's happening with kindergarten then and now, I won't read that again to you, but you can see a progression as we work through subject areas in English and language arts. And the nice thing is that kids are capable. Our kindergarten students or young students are capable of the things that are on the right side, what's expected of them. In mathematics, more expected, higher levels of achievement and higher expectations. Our planning for early childhood, you know, how long have we been talking about this? Of course, you know, Jamie mentioned the last 24 months, the district's been intensely engaged in discussion. Almost every board meeting, we've talked about our progress from the time we had a retreat back in October 2 years ago to where we are now. But I would tell you back in 1996, when we made the decision as a school district to consider all-day kindergarten. And in the late 1990s, the discussion about early childhood started in this school district with the proposition to construct an intermediate school, grades 3 and 4, to allow for some pre-K programming. But that first step from Dr. King to the Board of Education talks about the merits of all-day programming for our kindergarten students. And I've mentioned at previous presentations that if you extracted the word kindergarten and put pre-K in there now, you start to get a sense for what pre-K is to us now as what kindergarten was to us then. So we're still having that discussion about how we better impact our earliest learners. Of course, in 2007, I've been asked, and as you look at the two scenarios that we'll look at in greater detail in a little bit, the standalone facility versus the movement of ninth grade to the high school and reconfiguration, where does the concept of the auditorium fall? Well, you see it in the third bullet. There are two things lingering from this 2007 long-range facility plan. Members from our community, internal staff, and parents, all were involved in this long-range plan, which was scheduled to work for us for 10 years. So obviously by 2017, we hope to have everything accomplished on this 10-year facility plan. The two things that are lingering for us are the auditorium or performing arts facility, and the second bullet, which is the early childhood center. There was a separate ad hoc early childhood committee made up of another 25 to 30 teachers and parents and community members that brought this to the long-range facility plan as something that we should consider. And the last bullet on this page really relates to scenario one or option one, which is the standalone facility, similar to what happened in the late 1990s, and also for consideration if we're looking at future growth of the district. So you see two options that we have discussed have directly spun off of this facility plan, which many members of this community participated in the 06-07 school year. Many of the things that have occurred in this school district, from the renovations to the junior high school, middle school, to take out modular classrooms at the elementary schools, all came off of this plan. Our student enrollment is very strong, particularly if you encircle Wyman, Mark Twain, and Truman. You'll see that we have reached capacity in our school buildings. Our enrollment at 4,083, this is as of the last September Wednesday count. We like good numbers. It's a good problem to have for a little while. And then we need to start. Part of what we're talking about too will help us as we see this number grow. It's a good thing. Our class sizes, particularly at kindergarten, you see we have 17 sections of kindergarten. When you look at how full the schools are here, the class size ratio for kindergarten as recommended by the department is 17 to 25. Philosophically, as a school district, we've always remained somewhere in between the range, try to work our way toward the lower end of the range. There's no recommended class size. We keep an eye on this beginning in late spring, and the principals that are here will attest to this. We'll meet all through the summer, and as you look back at the size of the buildings, we're keeping track of that, plus how large class sizes get, and we've come to the board in late summer asking for another teacher to remedy class sizes that we have concerns about. But all of these are well within the ranges. Actually, our class sizes kindergarten here are the lowest in the Ozark Conference, which includes Lebanon, Waynesville, Springfield, Camdenton, West Plains. We actually last year had this discussion as an Ozark Conference superintendent's group, and I was surprised to hear even Springfield had class sizes of 30 in kindergarten. So there is a body of research that says the class sizes is not as important as the quality of the teacher, that students do better with a great teacher in larger classes than they do, obviously, conversely, with a lesser ability teacher and smaller numbers. So we really focus on hiring a great staff, and then work really diligently to make sure we have class sizes that are reasonable. If we were to add a kindergarten classroom, I'm not sure where we would put it, frankly, when you look back at this number here. And I think somewhere tonight we'll be talking about the board taking a tour of the 3 elementary schools like we did last year when we looked at Bulldog Preschool as part of our field trip. And we went to Nixon, Branson, and Jeff City. We'll continue our field trip extravaganza into this year only locally, and we'll kind of see that in action. We have our current early childhood programming consists of PAT. These are last year's numbers with families that were served. You see the 120 high need. For years, PAT works with our Head Start through the screening process too and we actually have, I believe, 8 kids that, like for example, at Head Start right now, they're receiving services at ECSC. A lot of that identification that Mr. Hinshaw talked about comes through our PAT program. Bulldog Preschool that we saw at Raleigh High School is a program that it's great for child development programming for the high school students, but we certainly aren't meeting the need because it doesn't start until later in the year, and we have a 24 student maximum and a waiting list that we quit counting because it's grown so large. Early childhood special education, tonight you see we're already at the higher than normal range. We typically end the year near 60 students in that program, and we'll see that when we take our tour as well. And you just approved a teacher for that program, and those are reimbursable funds. Early childhood special education is that acronym. Our summer school program has become very popular. Numbers are down a little bit this year, as you see from 14 to 13, but those are students that are able to interact with our school district in a regular kindergarten type environment before school starts. And it's parents bring them and pick them up and take them back to the daycare that they go to for the afternoon, or those students are at home. But they do find a way to get them here, and we're happy for that. We've had an early childhood committee that's functioned all of last year for about 18 months, and we'll continue to work with them. We'll meet with them this fall again to talk about our plans as they continue to mature. Those are last year's numbers. I know I'm going to pick on Jean Day since she's here from Head Start. I hear you have 88 students.
Yes.
Yeah, see, so I've got some idea about that. So we'll continue to work, and we'll add the CLC Center. Want to talk to as many people in our faith-based community that have, or private preschools that want to come to the table and talk. Our effort is to try to raise the level of opportunity for all students in our community. So last year, 50% of our 352 kindergartners were not enrolled in any pre-K programming, did not experience that. This year, our projections were for 348, and Mr. Hinshaw hit it dead, almost bullseye. We're at 349 right now. So are trending again at 50%. I read a report today, a national report today, that Missouri is actually 46% of, as a state, students are receiving pre-K programming. So we're trending a little better than the state, but that's still a pretty significant number that's not receiving. 46% are receiving pre-K programming. We're here, we've got 50. The DIAL score, that test is the developmental indicators for the assessment of learning. We run a lot of acronyms in our world, and what that measures is the motor and language and conceptual abilities of students. The test actually spans years 2 through 5 years, 11 months. We test 4 years, 6 months to 5 years, 11 months. And so what you're looking at is there's 35 points possible in those 3 domains. And when the children score in those 3 areas, the test is nationally normed, and they're actually placed in a percentage of achievement based on that, on a comparison of other students in like age groups. So that's a whole mouthful, but the bottom line to this slide is that those students that are involved in pre-K programs certainly test better than those who are not. On that test that we use and the nation uses to determine the kindergarten readiness of our children. I certainly would like to see that 58.39 go up too, as we offer more opportunity for continued growth in all of our opportunities for early childhood. Part of our work together as a school board, and many people on some committees, and what I've talked about in this community here have to do with what are some of the other school districts doing. We've heavily been involved in conversation, most recently with Kirksville. They're a school district of 2,500 students. They have a pre-K program that's recognized in the state. They also have 240 students in their program and have a waiting list. They work very well with their faith-based community. Similar in that they're a university town, so they value education, but they have a great need in that area. We've been to Jeff City to see their program. We've been to Nixa and Branson. All of those are award winners. Kirksville was a runner-up last year. And we went to Nixa and Branson because the two options that we have been discussing very closely mirror what those two districts did to accomplish early childhood programming. Nixa built a standalone facility and opened up a new portion of it just last month, beginning of the school year. And Branson reconfigured their district and moved the freshmen to the high school. Those at the bottom of the page are the school districts in South Central region, our South Central MASA or association, a group that have pre-K programming that's outside of early childhood special education and PAT. In other words, they have the kind of programming in place that we endeavor to enact. Newburgh has a peer model, for example. They have fewer students, obviously, but they have more than just the basic programming. So we're not ahead of the curve by any stretch. So what options have we been discussing? It very much, again, mirrors Nixa and Branson. So the first one that we've discussed is a pre-KK configured facility, which will require land, construction, and operation. It won't necessarily look like this, but this is what 17 sections of kindergarten and enough space to accommodate all of what we'd want to do with an early childhood center. And that would be moving all of our existing preschool programs, which is PAT and kindergarten, early childhood special education, to this new facility together. We'd serve up to approximately 170 4-year-olds. The 170 represents the 50% that we've seen over the last 2 years, students that are not receiving services. And our priority would be for those that are struggling academically and improve financial need, which mirrors the Title I program process. And how we would determine this, at least at this juncture, would be through the dial test. The selection for other available enrollees, we would have to continue to discuss. There are ways that that's being done either through random selection or first come, first serve. So in that population of 50%, we identify that those are the students who are not finding their way to one of the faith-based programs. They're not finding their way to Head Start, or Head Start has a waiting list, correct? So we have an underserved population that we need to prioritize for opportunity. You see in the fourth bullet, peer model, Title I, other braided funding sources as MPP, Missouri Preschool Project. Peer model is a model that's being used both Kirksville, Nixa, actually I think it's being used in Jeff City, most of them, in that for every early childhood special education student that you have, you're able to also offer programming to normally developing students who may meet that academic or financial need priority and get reimbursed on both for the program, which certainly drives down the potential cost for staffing. But we would certainly pursue that. I think it's a good, if you wanted to Google search peer model, you'd find a couple really neat programs in Kansas, I shudder to say.
It's okay.
Overland Park's one that I like the website because it explains the peer model. But Kirksville uses the peer model very well. They have 120 early childhood special education students and another 120 normally developing to meet 240 for their program. Title I programming, we've certainly experienced a little bit of compression of those dollars, but we hope that that bounces back. Would want to push our title programming opportunities down into a pre-K environment. That's happening quite a bit, and we would want to do that. And the Missouri Preschool Grant is just something that we certainly would apply for. In this, also on the next bullet, I have half-day programming, morning and afternoon sessions for 4-year-olds. So you can see there's more to do if you're a parent of a normally progressing 3-year-old and you want in this kind of program. I understand that. We're talking about getting started, not what will it eventually be. The curriculum opportunities, at least those are approved by the state of Missouri, Project Construct, Creative Curriculum, Emerging Language and Literacy. There's another acronym, and High Scope, which we talked about the High Scope Perry Preschool study in the past here, and certainly but Project Construct is underlined because it's the one that seems to have the most support. We've used that a lot here, even in this community. A lot of our teachers are teaching using Project Construct as they help train existing pre-K providers. But of course, any of those will work, and it's certainly approved by the state of Missouri. Our center will be licensed, and we will have fully certificated staff. We would certainly feel a responsibility of offering, like our individual teachers do now to a large extent, collaborative professional development opportunities for our faith-based organizations so they can receive the training that's required. And we certainly want to enrich in our opportunities and partnership with Head Start. We have no interest in doing anything, but we get all the kids from Head Start. As I just stated, we have 8 now that come to us for early childhood special education services, and 3 for language services. So we get them anyway. So it makes a lot of sense for us to continue to do that. I would propose that we even think about having a teacher and an aide from our program actually work over there with the teachers that are there to provide them support. We don't want to do anything other than work with them. So I think there's been maybe a little misconception discussion about us taking over Head Start. I don't even know how you take over a federal program.
Nor do we want.
I don't really want to be known for trying, and I think I just think we should work together, and with everyone that I've mentioned in that group. Transportation's mentioned there simply because if we have kids in half-day programming that go to one of those other daycares that were listed, or ones that we currently transport to, it makes an abundance of sense for us to work out where if a child is with us in the morning, that we would transport them to the daycare for the afternoon. And if those come to us in the afternoon from a daycare in the morning, we would pick them up and bring them to our center. Whether or not we already transport early childhood special education students, we've roughly calculated this may mean a couple, 3 more buses for us, but we want to be up front and talking about if we can help that. I wouldn't want a parent to not bring a child to our program because they have to take off work to come get them from our program and take them somewhere else. So I don't know what that looks like quite yet, but I think it needs to stay on a bullet point for discussion, and that's just based on some of the questions I received from those that ask. Project hasn't changed. Land acquisition of $700,000 for 15 acres. We've identified a couple tracts of land that are in close proximity to our existing schools, which will allow us to create interbus loops. It makes good sense for us, but we haven't really aggressively pursued that. As you might imagine, those people that are interested in selling their land do find their way to us. And but we need 15 acres, and if this is the project that we go with. The additional staffing is approximately $1.3 million, but I would like to think it would come back from that based upon the peer model, title programming, and other things that we might be able to do. But I don't want to undershoot this for the sake of an open and transparent discussion with the public. It will require additional resources. The new facility cost, that 50,000 square foot building, which is roughly the size of Mark Twain, is $11.2 million. So that will require local support as well. The second is the district reconfiguration. which would accomplish pre-K programming by repurposing existing facilities. So we would have one pre-KK building, and since I have been talking about this, I said it might be, I do say it's Mark Twain, for the sake of discussion. It doesn't mean it will be. I just like to keep my discussions consistent so people from Wyman won't think, no, it's going to be here, and no one said anything other than for discussion purposes. 2 first through third grade buildings, and that would be Truman and Wyman for the sake of this discussion. And 1 4th, 5th, and 6th grade building, which is now the 5th, 6th, and 7th grade building, which is the middle school, which may be coming upper elementary. This is Branson, by the way. The last one was Nixa. 1 7th and 8th grade building, which is the junior high school. And our freshmen go to Rolla High School. And where that 51,000 square foot addition would go, remember the other building was 50,000, is right where the front of the building, or building off of Cedar Street is now. You can see the existing Circle Drive. Lower left corner is the Blossom Basket and Dr. Moorcamp's office and sports rehab. So you kind of orient yourself, 10th Street on the left. 2-story addition. 12 classrooms. It won't necessarily look like this. I spoke to a journalism class yesterday at Rolla High School, and once again they were wanting to know how wide the hallways were going to be and whether or not they were going to have open lunch as seniors. Since the freshmen are coming in, the seniors poke out. So I said, we're not going to really talk about that here. And anyway, any lunch discussions you want to have to happen with Mr. Henshaw. So that federal nutrition program is going to be the next echo story that he gets to talk with them about. But you can see the auditorium is there, and one might ask, well, why is the auditorium in there? It has nothing to do with early childhood education. If you remember back to the 2007 facility study where an auditorium was recommended, it's there because it's a way for us to accomplish that. And if we're going to move close to 300 students to the high school, we have our current auditorium at the middle school will not seat all of our kindergartners and their teachers and a principal. So we only have that facility at the middle school. This is a facility that would seat close to 800? 850. So it would service that building plus the district as a center for the performing arts, our choir, our band concerts, everything that we go elsewhere to do. They get to do that here as part of this project. The same bullet points, I won't reiterate those. I would tell you that we already have 144. Last year we had 144 of our 320-some high school students that were at the high school first, third, fifth, and seventh hour. So those that say, well, of course, the kids yesterday during journalism understood that because many of them raised their hands and said, hey, I was one that came over here from the junior high school, and I asked, would you have rather been over here as a freshman? And of course, they all said, yeah. Of course, because they're there now, sophomores, and understand, now I'm earning credits for graduation, and I was over here anyway, so that seemed to make a little sense to them. Again, the same bullet points. The bottom is different in that the new facility projected cost is $12.7 million for that addition, but there's no land acquisition cost. We have factored in what it costs to run a building, an elementary school, to project costs for a standalone facility. Of course, you add 51,000 square feet to this building, you're going to add cost and for personnel, and that we factored that in as well. Again, hoping that the 1.3 million will not be 1.3 million. So funding discussions we've had. They've matured and evolved and will continue to do so as we find out more. We certainly, and I've defined discussion there just so in case someone finds it necessary to yell at me, that they'll understand that this is just a discussion. Nothing's been etched in stone. I wanted to point out our levy, our tax levy at 321.112 still ranks near the bottom. The schools below us, minus Neosho, are all either Lake of the Ozarks or federal impact aid affected. That's why their levies are so low. They receive, either they have more assessed value in the community because they have a Lake of the Ozarks. I don't know what Neosho, I'm not sure. If we were to, as we get through this discussion, you're going to see some scenarios. I pushed our levy up 50 cents. We still don't rank at the top. For teacher salaries, we rank at the top except for first column bachelor's degree. We're at 16. And you get down the lower end of our schedule, specialist plus 40 years, 40 hours. 40 hours, or a doctorate column, we get to 3rd and 6th. But everywhere else, randomly selected. This sampling of school districts minus St. James and Newburgh is the Camdenton Salary Survey. And we use this data set to determine how competitive our teacher salaries are, how well our student performance is compared to them, where our tax levy is compared to them, what our lunch prices are, and anything else policy-wise that we can think of. And in this group as well as the Ozark Conference, which I have indicated that the Ozark Conference Superintendents Group meets regularly to talk about these kinds of issues. So you see what happens to us at 50 cents. Our tax levy is 12 cents lower than what it was in 1988. Of course, the assessed value of the community continues to grow, and our levy is lowered as the value goes up. There's a counterbalance effect of assessment that does not allow the district to reap pure benefits, but what this shows is, particularly over the last few years, we've remained very strong, moved forward, financially solid, and have done so. I think we've been fiscally responsible. When we fund this project, you remember the pricing on both of them hovers around 11 to 12 million. You see that both of these issues are financed at 10 million. What we've done for the last 2 projects is supplement that difference out of Fund 4 capital projects and save money back to do that, so we're not asking our taxpayers to bear the entire brunt of what it would take to make a project go. We've done that to the tune of $3 to $4 million over the last 2 projects. In this case, you can see it'll require, 1 to 2 million. Lease purchase at 20 cents is a different project than the bond issue itself. A bond issue is a lot like a mortgage. It's paid off in 20 years. As a school district, we have very little debt. Actually, this calculation does take into consideration debt service as part of the levy. So lease purchase has certainly it's a little bit higher for the same amount of money, but there are advantages to lease purchase. The operating levy, 3 different intervals there. When you saw 1.3 million as the estimated cost, these are just options and what it costs to generate that much money out of the project. My hope would be that it's not 1.3 million. My hope would be that it would be more in line with what's there below that. But annually, we are always assessing programs and making changes to what we expend budgetarily based upon our needs. So staffing every year is looked at upon a great degree of scrutiny, and programs, because they're legacy programs, don't necessarily continue to exist if they're not meeting the needs of students for what they need as they move out of here into post-secondary life. So my point to that is, through efficiencies, we're also constantly rendering out ongoing costs and repurposing those. And proof of it is how we've been able to do what we're doing with technology while maintaining the levy where it is. That's one shining example. So you had enough of that slide? You see levy, it's got to be a levy for ongoing expenses to operate, and there's got to be something to pay for the building. We've not done anything to our levy for going on 14 years now, maintaining what we have. The impact residentially and commercially, using those intervals of a 30-cent. Now, when I say 30 cents, you would have to take 15 bond and 15 operating. 15 and 15 makes 30. So you see 30 there, both at commercial and residential, and what that cost would be. And I had 50 cents on there. You saw 50 cents of what would happen to our levy in the comparison, and of course 65, trying to cover those bases. Another spot to look at this, phasing in at the highest level at 65 over a 3-year period. We would certainly like to propose a 3-year phase-in, because in a lease purchase and or a bond issue, and when you see the timeline for opening this facility, not all of it's needed at one time. Plus, the last time we phased a levy in, we didn't levy the entire amount because we didn't need it. And as we stand right now, we voluntarily roll back our debt service levy from over 32 cents down to 25 to pay our existing debt. So we would certainly want to continue that philosophy in passing the savings back to our taxpayers. And if we don't need the entire amount, we won't ask for it to support this project. But these are this is the reality of those numbers and the impact over a 3-year phase-in. Our timeline, we're now continuing to solicit feedback. That's part of the purpose of tonight. There's been a survey out on our website, midway down on the home page, for several weeks. I've sent several e-blasts out, spoken at several service clubs and anywhere that will listen to us. And you've endured this presentation, which I appreciate. You can see where we're headed next. November, we'll be taking whatever option of the two that seems to be the most favorable and working to refine it even further. You've heard a lot of new things tonight regarding the programming details. I can't really go any further without further discussion on programming details, or at least I'm not comfortable doing that. I think there's a lot of ideas we need to continue to discuss as far as the program. January, this board will have to entertain the idea of placing it on the ballot for April, which time we'll form an early childhood committee. The election will be in April of 15, and then we'll be in the design development the entire year, 15-16. And with completion and opening August of 17. The survey results as of this morning at 11 o'clock, 660 responses. The preference that continues to hold strong. The renovation, it has not wavered at all in its popularity. It has been above, it's 60 to 65%, close to 60 the entire time. You see the breakdown. I don't need to read those to you. What's added to this is how the types of responses have landed so far. And then you can see the least respondent seem to be the freshmen, parents, and the ones that have responded the most are those 94, or those that will be eligible for pre-K. So, back to the forum. This was the second slide. I'll turn facilitating over to Mr. Myers, and Mr. Henshaw we have a microphone if anybody in the crowd wants to ask a question, and we also have questions that were submitted to us electronically that we'll try to answer as well. And I'll just stay right here.
So what we'll do is we'll ask anyone who wants to ask a question publicly to come down and use the mic to do that, and then Kelly's got a second mic.
Bring it to you.
Okay, he'll bring it to you. Well, I just want to say, we talked about this being for us a 24-month process. Included in that, we can't forget, is that I think it was last spring when you went to each school building in the district, and the teacher, faculty, and staff were able to do a survey, and we got lots of good feedback from that as far as additional ideas, and that's been the process the whole way, is we've gotten ideas, feedback, input, and certainly getting that input from those who would most affect within the district was important, and continues to be. So Just wanted to share that as well as the survey, and what a great response. 660 is fantastic.
We had over 200 responses, over 2/3 of our staff internally.
Yeah.
But the comments were really good, as you mentioned, as well. And the second option was more popular with our internal staff as well.
Right. So, yeah, just make a motion, raise your hand or something, and Mr. Henshaw will bring you the mic, and Jeannie will let you know if, when you're at 3 minutes, if we need to do that, and we'll just go from there. So, anybody? And most of us will probably know who you are, but if you'll tell us, that'd be wonderful
Well, if
too.
it came down, they'd be.
Bill Wise, I was thinking if you were thinking about the range being up by 6, I wonder where I'd be today if I had preschool. We put up to 170. Is that what's not currently enrolled?
Right, but that's just half of the current, up to 170. That's half of the current enrollment in kindergarten. Our enrollment right now in kindergarten is 349,
Okay.
so up 50% of that.
So you know, like 4-year-olds would be that 170.
Yes,
That currently is not going to.
correct. Last year it was closer to 180 because of the 360 we started with. We ended up at 352 in kindergarten last year at the end of the year, and we were at 50% of that group that didn't have pre-K experience as well.
Has there been a survey, or do we know why those 170 were not enrolled?
Well, I think they either can't afford it, they don't have ways to get them there, possibly. There are space issues. If they can't afford it and they qualify for Head Start, you heard that they have a waiting list. They're only accepting so many students. And all of those faith-based programs do, in some cases, have waiting lists. I don't know if they do this year, but as we worked through last year, that was the case. And I know that St. Pat's, for example, has a pre-K program. In order to add kids to their program, they have to add another teacher. So that becomes it becomes cost prohibitive to them. And also space.
Well,
This would be a free program then?
Well, what we would prioritize, as I said earlier, would be those students that would qualify for Title I type services using the dial assessment. They have academic and financial need as a priority, because those are the ones that are not receiving services as well. And we would also receive some reimbursement from the state on those costs. But we would certainly try to address those that are not in the program now, because we're not interested in competing with the other programs that currently exist.
So it would not be for as a community as a whole?
I didn't hear you.
It would not be for the community as a whole? In other words, if I have a preschool child and not, in other words, I make sufficient money, et cetera, I cannot enroll that.
That's possible if they don't meet that other criteria, as it stands right now. We'd like to, but then we'd be competing with the existing programs, and that's not where we started. We're just trying to get started using 4-year-olds. They're serving, in some cases, the Lutheran school is ready to serve birth to 3, or birth to 4. We're just looking at 4-year-olds in a half-day program to get started.
So basically, from my viewpoint, then this becomes a safety program.
Well, it depends on whether you feel like it's a good investment. If you have a child that enters kindergarten and you've been to a pre-K program and you're in with a child that hasn't been in a pre-K program, that teacher's spending a lot of time servicing deficits that they may not have to service if that child had pre-K programming. So we're just trying to offer opportunities. You call it what you want, but we're trying.
One thing I guess I have a concern about, and I don't know how you address it, but we have preschool and all that, but we don't deal with parents or help parents do these things.
All the programs that we toured, they have a heavy parent involvement component to it. If you're going to be able to come to the program, you have to give something back to it of your time. And that was something that was quite enlightening to us. We liked that, particularly at Jefferson City.
It was a requirement.
It was it was a requirement for them to be able to stay in the program, to be involved. their parent education. You saw the, one of the tenets of the top 10 by 20 is that there's also parent education that occurs. That happens in PAT. The whole purpose of PAT is for parent educators to get into high needs and help parents figure out, how to best meet the needs of their children. And then we don't do anything with them as a district from 3 to the time they hit us in kindergarten, unless they go to one of those other programs.
Did I hear you correctly in saying that you don't go to preschool, you never catch up?
I don't know if I wouldn't say never. I never say never.
Okay. Will they
But it
catch up?
is hard.
Third grade, fourth grade?
It's hard. You've got several teachers in here that teach at those grade levels that are sitting to your right that would tell you probably where those deficits are.
I guess from my perspective, I talk to some people, when you look at kindergarten, 21, 22, 23, or first, second, third grade. It appears to me like if we have a kindergarten teacher for 15 students, my tax money, I think, and I've heard people say, I won't support this, but I support lowering our classroom. And I would basically say, if you did a survey, I think most papers, and I would basically say, most teachers would say that's a better program. If we could have one teacher for 15 students, rather than one teacher for 24 students. Or if you got 24 students, one teacher for 12. Personally, I think our teachers are underpaid. And if you want to increase morale, enthusiasm, you give a teacher 12 students, give that teacher a pay raise, and you increase morale. I would vote for tax incentive tax.
Thank you, Dale.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Tom?
Tom Sager, I'm in the Rolla School District, and I volunteer in several kindergarten classes at Mark Twain. And I really notice the difference, especially at the beginning of the year, between those who have had schooling and those who have not. I feel this program is just so important, and I hope you continue to push it forward the way you're doing. And another personal experience, I was pushed into a class that I didn't belong in when I was small, and I was in my 20s by the time I recovered from it, so it can take a long, long time to recover from being behind, so I think this is really important.
Thank you, Tom. Anybody else? Oh, come on. Dale, you want?
Dale.
Auditorium,
Wait.
you're thinking about?
Let Kelly give you the mic so we got it on television.
On the auditorium, how many seating capacity will that be?
850.
850. So the graduation ball still have to be held elsewhere?
That's correct. We get a significant discount on graduation because we have a cooperative agreement with Missouri S&T, so that's,
And they're putting air conditioning in it.
yeah.
They
Right,
are?
Jim?
Right,
It's
Jim?
done.
It's done.
Oh, hallelujah.
But we also envision that auditorium being open to community events, too.
That's correct.
Right?
So we would say how much money we would save annually
Okay.
by not having to use it.
Oh, that's
I
a
know
good
we-
question.
Anybody else? Okay.
Chris Baldwin. Just one other thing to kind of tap onto what this gentleman was mentioning. I think something else when we're talking about early education. There's a lot of studies out there that support the development that's going on at age 3, at age 4, and age 5. And you touched on just one of them with the 90%. Yes, we could try to address kids in kindergarten and try to help them to catch up. But there's a lot of brain development and educational development that's taking place earlier before that. And that's part of what early childhood education is trying to adjust. I just kind of throw that out there for whoever may watch this later.
Yes, that's true.
Is early childhood, is it, you hear about it at the federal level, and obviously there's talk about it at the state level. What is the future of early childhood? Is it going to be a requirement at some point? Is it going to be what kindergarten was? I mean, you hear and read, obviously, more than all of us.
Simplistically, just looking at what's being expected now of a child, standards-wise, and yes, what was taught in kindergarten years ago is now.
But I mean, is it going to
First
be?
grade is expected now in kindergarten.
Is it going to be just expected for every district
I believe
to
so.
provide it?
Well, there's a number of states it already is. Early childhood is required as part of the curriculum now in a lot of states.
And it certainly is part of the Missouri's waiver from No
Mhm.
Child Left Behind that as a top 10 by 20 performing state, that school districts in this entire state would have some early childhood programming, certainly more than what we have now. We're not ahead of anybody. Matter of fact, we're behind most with this subject.
I think the bar chart is really a critical one that shows what different programs impact success. And the one that we don't really do well at all is the one we're talking about doing.
And I think anyone that's been in education, like, when I was in middle school, I could at middle school tell which students had some preschool and which hadn't, even at that grade level, because they just were more equipped. They were more equipped to do what they were expected to do, even at that age. So I don't know if you can catch up. I guess you can eventually, but I think it's very difficult.
Yeah, it's a
So,
matter
we're
of.
level, like we've said, we're trying to level
We're trying to get
the
everybody-
playing
we're trying to
field
get
so that
everybody
all
up.
kids have that equal chance.
Trying to get everybody
But I
up.
think we're also, I mean, we're focusing on academic issues here. The fact of the matter is it has wider ranging
Yes.
effects than just academics.
So true.
I mean, this is going to have social implications. It's going to have family implications. It'll have community betterment implications, all because we're talking about what 4-year-old kids need now, as opposed to what they needed when they were 5 or 6, 20 years ago. And so it's just, we're the public school district. We have a responsibility to the public, and this is, I think, a very strong need, not just for that group of kids that'll be in kindergarten next year, the year after, but for the entire community.
Well, and I think that slide that you just put back up was so important about how development, 90% of the brain is developed by the age of 5. I know years ago at Wyman, we did so much studying of the importance of reading to children. In fact, we went so far as to having bibs in the prenatal department of Phelps County Hospital that said, "Read to me." And it's just the importance of starting from the get-go, reading to children, the amount of words that they're exposed to by the time they go into kindergarten. It's a vast difference between some homes, and it's so important we've got to close that. It's sort of like preventive medicine. You do things early to try to prevent problems later on.
Well, Nat, you mentioned it, but that was the thing that caught my attention when we went to Jeff City, was that requirement that the parents are in the classroom, in the school, and so you're educating the parents of some of these high-need kids and low-income kids as much as you're educating the kid. And I think that has the huge impact that Greg was talking about.
Right, and I was thinking Greg had mentioned that, like, about even like the little ones carrying their own tray or pouring their own drink, or like they learn those social skills that maybe they come
They're
to
not
school
getting.
not having any
Yeah.
idea what those social skills are. So, we witnessed that.
Yeah. It was a great program that Lady was running. She was really on top of it.
One of the questions Mr. Wands, I believe, was asking a little bit about whether a regular ed student would have space in this preschool. And just to comment on that just a little bit more, the facility that is being proposed, or the space that we're proposing, doesn't allow for us to serve 340 students. Part of that is because of cost. Part of that is, Dr. Zales has shared, is that many people in our community are saying, we don't want you to compete with faith-based because we value sending our children to a faith-based daycare, preschool. So the idea is to get started, but there are spaces, currently ECSC, you know, as we said tonight, about 60 students, and we're talking about giving opportunities to 170, 150, 170. So there are, those students may be academically challenged, and their parents may have income, but if they're academically challenged, they may have an opportunity to go to this space. They may qualify because of academic need. And some of these children haven't been born yet, so even parents who financially are okay right now, they don't know, you know, realistically their child may qualify academically. It's not just a social issue. It's not just people who are low income. It's academic need for those students as well. So that, I don't know if that answered, it seemed like you were asking if kids just would be excluded. So I don't know if that helps or not.
At what point does this become mandatory? By the government?
Not at this point.
Not this
I don't know that.
You might repeat that question.
No.
Compulsory attendance starts at age 7.
So no.
Yeah,
To
If
kindergarten,
you
it's not
remember
even
back
mandatory.
when we started full day from half day, it was because they thought it was the right thing to do, from half day kindergarten to full day. It's not mandatory. The attendance law doesn't start till age 7.
One of the written questions, Aaron, I think will go along with what we were just discussing, but this person asked if basically how we would be involved with existing preschool programs. And I know it's one of the things we've talked about is how can we help them with professional development and making sure that they're addressing the same kinds of academic issues that are expected of today's kindergartners. So can you talk with that just a bit?
Well, we have teachers that do that individually now, and I think it would be our responsibility to offer to those faith-based programs and Head Start an opportunity for access to professional development and things that they would need to do to maintain their accreditation at the level it is. They have to attend so many hours of in-service, and we would provide that.
Yep.
I believe we do that in a lot of other areas.
Did they not do that in Nixa?
They do that. They do that in every preschool program that we toured and have talked to. Kirksville does it as well.
Well, it makes sense, right? I mean, eventually those kids are coming here. So, yeah, I think it's a great idea.
If we're truly thinking about what's best for every child that ends up in our school district, raising the level of opportunity and raising the level of quality would be what our objective would be. It wouldn't be that we're better than someone else. We're going to get all these kids. They come to us. So it's not their kids and our kids. It's
Our kids.
it's the community.
And we want every kid to have an opportunity for preschool. We don't necessarily need or want them to do that here with us.
Well, I doubt if there's any, maybe you can answer this, I doubt if there's any district in the state of Missouri that has enough preschool space to serve every child that comes to them in kindergarten.
Not on that list. There are waiting lists at every single one of them. I don't know if Nixa has capabilities now with the new center. I didn't think they were building 29,000 square feet onto another space. So I think they all have waiting lists. I know Kirksville does. Matter of fact, they're talking about building onto their center.
And I would assume that you're talking about putting together an early childhood committee. That's something that we'll seek more input on about how access is going to look, what it's going to look like.
Yeah, you know, during this discussion, Dale's questions are good. I get drug into some of the intricate details before I have had a really robust discussion with more people. What's it going to cost? What's it going to look like? To continue to push this discussion forward, it's my responsibility just to put it out there, and then through this presentation has matured over the last 2 years based upon what we've seen and who we talk to, and the reason why we're doing what we're doing tonight is to continue to listen. So,
Of the two options, and again, I'm trying to go off of questions that were asked, written, how do they affect our capacity for growth at the at all levels, and addressing that? If is one better than the other? Or?
well, every building we have has conceptual drawings that add space to them, and that includes even the conceptual of the conceptual at the high school. So every time that we've done a project, even this building has conceptuals of additional space. And so we think about growth for the next board, the next me, what's the community going to look like? Every one of them have plans for that to occur, so yes.
Okay. So neither is
one,
better than
yeah.
the other.
And on purpose, they're both the same square footage, they're similarly priced, same early childhood experience. I think the reason why the second scenario at this time is more popular is because it touches people in the district at more spots. From the time that they are at pre-K, if they don't have pre-K children, why is it I would invest in this project? Well, you're going to benefit somewhere else if in the district, and I think it's the most challenging internally because we'll reposition people. Neither one of them are easy. So doing nothing's easy, but I don't think that doing nothing is the right thing to do, personally.
Okay.
On another note, do you have any sense of how much I'm assuming we pay to use Leach Theater, for instance, for band and choir concerts? Do you have any idea what the annual?
Well, you mentioned graduation, and I would tell you, because of the chancellor, frankly, and we have a much easier and more equally advantageous
Better relationship.
facility-wise and other programs. The relationship, it's easier to do, so the cost of that is minimal.
Okay.
Yeah, the cost, when you're talking about this project, the cost is minimal. The reality is, for example, the Leach Theater, they can't give that to us for 6 weeks of rehearsal for a drama production.
Right.
So it's the ability to use it, not necessarily the cost of a one-night music concert or something like that. So there's differences in, I think the community back in '07, the committee that talked about the auditorium as a need was, in their eyes, they said, our students need access to something, our patrons need access to something, not just when it works one night, every month or something, but access for programming, access for education, where a drama class can be down on that stage, where a band can perform, if they want to do a concert 3 nights in a row, they could do that, or something. The Renaissance Festival, for example.
Yeah.
That might happen 2 nights instead of 1. It might happen 4 nights instead of 1 to get
Well, there wouldn't be
population.
transporting the students from the high school
That's the
over.
whole, we've had discussions about not doing an auditorium and working with the university, trying to pool our resources best we can, and then access it becomes the issue. If it's first hour and you want to go to the auditorium and you got to go to the second hour class, we're not running buses and getting there and back, and can we have it, as Kelly said, for the duration of time that we would need it at that particular time without affecting the program they have there. So it's nice in theory, but it doesn't work practically for
Just
us
stick
in
with-
terms of transporting students back and forth. You mentioned Ozark Actors Theater, all those things that can happen in there. It's not, we didn't make that up. I mean, it came from
It came from the
it came from
community.
the committee. So if,
Loud and strong.
yeah, so the project can be done without an auditorium, but it remains a lingering, unaccomplished goal then if we value that previous plan.
I think the ability to get large groups of kids together during the school day and expose them to outside speakers, and, I mean, we just don't have a good way to do that now, and I think there's so many things that we could ultimately use that facility for beyond band and choir and theater.
Drama.
I think it's gonna be one of those things that we're gonna look back in a couple of years and go, geez, why didn't we do this
Well,
15 years ago?
When you were talking about phasing in also, isn't it a possibility that we could get some grant money for that structure to be storm shelter for the community?
Yeah, we've applied for the FEMA storm shelter money for both facilities. We haven't put it in any other than a discussion that we've applied for it, simply because like any federal program dollars, I don't know if they're there. So it would be one of those things that we're into it, and plus if they were to say you have it, it's today. We have 18 months to use it. So part of us are saying we don't really want to know yet. Part of us would like to know, so we could say the cost of the project now is minus $3 million, because that was the projection.
But that would be the beauty of phasing it in, as you might find out through the
It would
project.
be very beautiful, yes.
Well, we've got a track record of doing that. If we don't need the money, we don't collect it. So if we would get the grant at some point in the process, we would just not, at the tax rate hearing, we would just not set the rate that high.
You know, one thing I've thought about as far as when we talk about having contact with those families who might have kids eligible who are not currently involved in preschool but would certainly qualify for what we're discussing here, is it's going to take effort on our part, PAT or whoever, to locate and make contact with those folks, whether that's through our county health department or other providers of services. That's one thing I think we're also going to have to be committed to is not just expect them to come knocking on our
Right.
door. We're going to have to go out.
That's a discussion we had with the faith-based group committee that I hope Chris joins soon. We're going to have to go out and get them.
Yep.
We're going to have to find them, and we had that, Gene.
We'll have to work out confidentiality, but I have a large portion on the waiting list that we will never serve because their household income is between 110% of federal poverty and 130% of, and they're gonna qualify under the Title I definition, but we can't serve them.
Because their parents make too
So
much.
some cooperation and maybe sitting at the same table and looking at the income and shifting to these are mine and these are yours.
We didn't get that on.
Yeah.
Do you mind saying that again, just so we
Into them.
Because basically what you're saying, there's a lot of folks out there that would qualify for this, but they literally make too much money to qualify for a Head Start. Is that correct?
Yes, under the structure of our grant, our focus is families whose household income is below 100% of the federal poverty level. And I didn't bring those numbers because I didn't know if they'd come up. And we have, in our grant, we can exceed and we can have up to 10% of our students from households that are above that income level. Philosophically, we know the kids are out there and we are choosing not to serve them. So I have applicants whose household income is 103% of poverty. I can't serve that child. If I could say, oh, here's, we give them all, we say, call 458-0193. We give them that, but that's all I can give them.
But it'd be nice if somebody was sitting there with you in the
Yes.
school district.
Or if I could say, I need you to call because I think your child may be able to go to the school district's preschool. And I don't want to hog and move, but we have plenty of people. I have dads in my building who left Rolla Public Schools for the discipline office when they were 16. They don't want to take their kid to you. There are probably people who don't want to bring their kid to me. You know, I'm really sure as professionals, we can work this out.
Yep.
How do you identify those people? I mean, do they find you? Do you go out looking for them? I mean, because that's the same dynamic we're talking about, having to find.
Recruitment in Head Start is as firmly entrenched as home visits and parent participation. One of the things we get is family support from the state really gives us the list of all the households in the county, which is frustrating because there's people in Edgar Springs, and I know, well, darn, can't help them. And we send postcards. We know that those kids are out there, and so we invite families to apply. We get a lot of those kids, the CHIPS, the state insurance plans, and those families make enough money to qualify for the state insurance, but they don't qualify for us. And it's frustrating because they don't have the disposable income to go to a Presbyterian preschool or the Methodist preschool or the Lutheran preschool or the St. Patrick's preschool, but I can't offer them the space.
Those are the kids we.
It's a loophole there,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this would be a really great solution to meeting the needs of those families.
Thank you.
That's interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Dr. Sells, I think you've responded either in your presentation or from other questions to everything I had here. Does anybody else have anything? Questions you've taken from folks?
There's a couple,
Couple?
but just to fill time here.
Do you want to hear more about those Kansas programs?
I'll read about that. I know where to go. I asked a question about, since we had cuts to parents as teachers in the past due to state funding cuts, would we consider trying to restore some of that funding to help out with this education of parents before age 4, before we could get them as part of this program?
I think everything that was listed on the bullet points should be up for that discussion. We do supplement that program now at the tune of about $50,000. The state has not reinstated that funding, so we're already supporting it.
But we did cut the budget.
Yeah, we cut some of the services that, home visits for the parent educators. Certainly it makes sense if you're going to help with Head Start and help with the identification of students and try to get parents involved early, that we would need to look at that. All of that costs.
Right.
So.
Yeah. But it wasn't, that budget is not real large, not a real large budget. A comment, not a question, is that, we still are short our formula funding to the tune of $2.5 million per year. I don't think the state will ever get to fully funded before they change the formula, at least I'm told that, but that could alleviate some of our funding issues, and where to put the money, of course, would be subject to discussion of the administration of the board, so.
I think that's a safe assumption that it's not going to be funded. And I don't know when and if it'll get rewritten. It'll continue to be prorated, and it's prorated now to 97%, roughly between 96 and 97% of what we were expected to receive of a previously
Reduced amount.
adequacy target amount. So, I just think simplistically stated that there's a shift from state to local for the continuation of programs that you have. And the whole idea here is not to cut programs we currently have in order to move forward in offering more for the children we serve. And having not done anything to a levy for 14 years and continuing to repurpose dollars, we have been spending reserves to offset wild fluctuations in state formula. Somewhere in that, we're going to have a discussion with the community about continuing to move forward, and that's what all of this is. I don't like taxes any more than anybody else. I get it, believe me. I'm proud of what we've done with what we have. And we do pay our teachers well. We do keep our class sizes low. They're within all those things I enumerated up there. Our teacher salaries are among the top in that 26 school comparison. And that's because the community told us, pay your teachers to attract and retain the best. And we take 1,400 applications a year for 20-some positions and feel that we have a good selection process, and we're proud of the staff we have now. Students do well here, and we have a tradition to uphold, so.
One fear that I've heard was, well, if you do this, how are you going to keep from detracting dollars and resources from our current programs and services, pre-K through graduation? I'm assuming, and just ask you to speak to that, what we would take to as a ballot issue would be what would be needed to cover the cost of anything added.
That's correct. Yeah, with the projection of what 15 cents on the levy generates at 600,000, and you see the amount that I had there at 1.3 million, you would deduce from that we're going to deficit 700,000. We're going to cut something to arrive at 700,000. And it is true that our budget last year was built on a deficit, and that deficit wasn't what we realized. We certainly don't want to expend, and we underestimate revenues. We come back better than budgeted in order, and that's a good thing. This year, we've planned to deficit spend. As part of the responsibility that you have is we have a policy in place that when our unrestricted fund balance moves to 17%, we're done, and we're going to start cutting programs or do something to make sure that doesn't occur. To have too much money on reserve is irresponsible too, because we're not a savings and loan institution. So what we're trying to do is offset those wild uncertainties, which that is the certainty we get, is it's uncertain every year as to what we're going to get. We're using our balances that, I said that right?
Yes, you did.
Use those to offset that issue. So we're solid financially, but we can't continue to grow and meet the needs of higher demands and higher expectations without doing something.
And we're solid financially because we saw the storm coming.
That we've been planning for that.
Yeah.
That's correct.
What has anyone fielded any questions or comments from patrons about moving the freshmen from the junior high to the high school? I had one person that told me that he wasn't real sure that would be good, but I haven't.
Everybody I've talked to says they think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Either that or put them away out somewhere by themselves.
Yeah, and I have heard that you put the ninth graders in a whole separate place. But the comments I've gotten from a lot of folks,
Not way out, but
my kids are all sort of gone through the high school thing, is
Yep.
the ninth grade, and it's really not a knock on the junior high, but I think that the kids in ninth grade don't really get they're in high school now, and this really matters, and credits count and grades count.
Attendance.
And the sense is that moving them into the high school will really sort of enforce that or make that more aware in the kids' mind. It's serious now.
Role modeling.
Yeah.
I know, I went to high school, it was 7 through 12, and I know as a 7th grader, looking at the 12th graders, and I realized, this is serious.
Yeah. I've heard nothing but good ideas. And I gotta say, you guys know this, I started with the build a separate facility. I thought that was
too.
absolutely where I wanted to go, and my thinking over the last 24 months has really shifted, and my sense is much like the patrons now, there's a lot of good in that, in addition to the early childhood piece.
It addresses a
And
lot
so
of
we're getting more bang for our buck than just building this. And I was 110% in favor of building
I
a
was too.
standalone facility
Jeannie,
when we started this discussion.
We do, however, understand the importance of the freshman year to what it means to graduation. That you will, everywhere you'll see that success during that year is vital for kids graduating. So I don't think we have an idea that we're going to throw the freshmen in without some concept of, they are different, it is different. It isn't, you know, so, you know, when we visited Branson, they had the freshman academy there. So I think in planning, we will need to plan for how we take care of the freshmen, the supports that we put in place to help them get started off on that first
They
year
had
of high
just the
school.
freshman lunch time, I think. It was
They
just-
did, yeah. I don't know that we would be able to do all of
They
that,
had
but
the
that's
core classes all together too in the same
core classes
hallways.
together, you
Which
know,
is-
where we
which is
place
what we
things.
had-
That
that's-
is a consideration, though.
And that's what we had here essentially when we had the freshman high. It wasn't connected, but it was essentially what Branson has now. The freshmen had all their core courses in that building. If you had advanced courses, you simply walked 100 yards down to the high school. And so,
Yeah.
Or ran.
yeah.
There was one question related to that I received via email that asked about seventh grade activities. You know, will seventh grade activities become a part of that second option? And I, only speaking personally, see that as a logical step. It's not embedded in this, but if you have seventh and eighth graders together, and we have several of the activities that we participate in with our conference schools, for example, they want to do seventh grade activities with us. And it's not just sports, but that's where that first question spins from. It makes logical sense for that discussion to happen since they're together. Now that adds cost. So tonight we've been adding PAT and seventh grade, and so we have to have that. We have to have that further. That's the purpose of what we're doing tonight. The other question on there had to do with, will it compromise our teacher pay? Our teachers only receive 1% raise, I believe it was. That's not necessarily accurate. It's not accurate. Last year, when we ran 1% through the salary schedule, plus movement on the schedule, which equates to an average of 2.4%. So over the last 3 years, our teachers have received, and we do that because we're competing with that group I had up there in the Camdenton salary survey. It literally comes down to, in January, hey, what are you guys going to do on your salary schedule? And everybody keeps their cards close to their chest. And as soon as we hear Lebanon's doing one, or movement only, then we start talking with our teachers about, hey, I think we want to do one. We want to steal the best we can and pay the best we can. And we've remained in that top level and have done well, again, during this economic stretch, because we believe that's where the best investment, that's what the community said we should do. So it hasn't been 1%. The average has been 2.4, and some are higher than that.
But the misconception is because it's written that we give 1%, they don't understand that movement means a raise also.
When you run 1% through the base, it's about 650. It's 600,000. No, it's 300,000. It's 300,000 for movement, 300,000 for each percent, give or take a little. So if you give 2% plus movement, you're close to $1 million of ongoing expense. But 80% of our budget's people, so we value our people first. You have.
One of the concerns I've had voiced to me is the number of transitions. If a kid starts with us in preschool or kindergarten, goes all the way through 12th grade, they're going to go to 5 locations now. Some people have a concern about that. How would you address that?
Well, they go to kindergarten, preschool and kindergarten
go
in
4
one
now.
location.
Well,
Then
they
they'd
have-
either go to,
then 1 through 3, then the middle school,
Then the
then
middle
the junior
school.
high, then the high school.
We would be adding one.
So we'd be
We
adding
would be
one.
adding
Four
one
now.
transition.
Yeah.
And if you remember, 2 years ago, one of the scenarios was that we were adding 2 transitions. And so
Yeah.
that was one of the reasons why that, we want to keep transitions down. I know Dr. Zalis has talked about research that says transitions affect students. So it went from 2 to 1. I would say, and I think probably teachers would agree, though, in our elementaries right now, some of our most struggling students make 2 or 3 transitions a year.
Yeah.
And part of that is because, in theory, if we only had 2 1 through 3 buildings,
attendance.
They wouldn't make maybe as many transitions because there's only 2 buildings in town instead of 3 serving those kids. So really some of the most struggling kids are really making a lot of transitions. So we'd love for them to be
Grounded.
able to stay with the same teacher for that year.
I sort of like the concept of all the kindergartners being in one building all together for a year, and then they go to 2 buildings, and then they come back together in the middle school.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't know. I think it's interesting.
If I could go back to some discussion that was held earlier, and we talked where, we're trying to meet the needs of those students that don't have any preschool. I didn't think we had precluded those that would go to preschool somewhere possibly from attending our schools through a tuition-based selection if there was space available. I don't think we make that decision yet or tonight. I mean,
Well, there's certainly
we wanna
several
compete.
different methods that occurs. There's a sliding scale based upon income that would use the free and reduced lunch calculation, the income brackets. That's a logical place that people go. But there are several variations on that theme.
we had interest in the university with, they were interested in building a child development center.
Right,
And
and
wanted it as an instrument for faculty recruitment. So.
And similarly situated to what we have here in this building, we release space back to East Central and Missouri Southern. If that we can get to that discussion point, we can lease space to the university. We went into this discussion knowing all along if they had an interest in working with us, because we were trying to figure out the auditorium piece, that's still there.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to the chancellor last Friday about it, frankly. It's still there.
Okay.
We attended the master plan meetings, and we know it's still there for them. We've got several relationships with the university all along, from curriculum to facilities, so that makes good sense too.
That's another way to do it.
Thank you, Dr. Salas. Anybody else have anything? It's this is good. We've really come a long ways, haven't we? And even tonight, with added information that helps us, and ultimately we're going to have to pick a plan and go and
Is the survey closed,
fill
or are
in
there
some of
still
those details.
Survey closes at the end of the month, so anybody watching.
still time to vote?
Can't vote often unless you're going to a different device, but if you log on to our website.
Different ISP, not just a different device. I tried that.
And we're always open to additional questions that you can submit to
Yeah,
Nancy or Dr. Salas, or certainly any of us.
I will note, in
Yes, sir.
looking at the MSBA fall conference agenda, that there are sessions again on early childhood.
Yep.
So I don't know who the finalists are.
I'm not on that committee anymore, so I don't know either. It's all a mystery now.
Yeah, we would encourage anybody to log on and complete the survey. We'll close it at the end of the month, and as Jamie said, Nancy's going to take the questions submitted to us and some of the discussion points, and we'll have Jenny will put a section on our website for that. I try to call or answer every email that comes to me regarding the project, so continue to do that. I really wouldn't want people to say it's my plan or what do I, because it's going to have to be ours. It's what the community will support. So we're just trying to do better for our kids in our community.
Absolutely. All right, thank you all. I'll close the forum and accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. 10 after 7.
I don't think that was in one of the emails or what. Tell Rob Barr that he's in the Optimist Club. He's relatively new.